The moment I stepped through the heavy glass doors of Belmont, I felt it. That familiar tightening in my chest that comes with walking into a place where you're expected to fail before you even speak. The restaurant stretched before me like a cathedral of wealth, polished marble floors reflecting chandelier light, tables draped in cream linen, the muted symphony of crystal glasses and hushed conversations. This was Mayfair's crown jewel, where a single meal cost more than most people's weekly salary. I was wearing jeans and a clean jumper. My hands were still rough from morning chores on the farm, the smell of earth probably clinging to my skin despite the shower I'd taken. 5 years. 5 years since I'd last seen my family, and Victoria had finally convinced me to come back. She'd had a baby, my nephew, and she wanted me to meet him. A peace offering, she called it. I should have known better. The hostess looked at me the way you'd look at a stray dog wandering into a 5-star hotel. Her eyes traveled from my worn boots to my face, her professional smile never quite reaching her eyes. "Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting the Hartley party," I said, keeping my voice steady. She checked her tablet with the kind of deliberate slowness that communicated exactly what she thought of me. "This way." They were already seated at a corner table, Mum, Dad, Victoria, and her husband James. Mum dripped in Cartier jewelry that caught the light like small fires on her wrists and throat. Victoria wore a cream blazer that probably cost more than my monthly farm expenses. Dad sat with the casual authority of someone who'd never questioned his right to occupy space. Victoria saw me first. She stood, her smile bright and forced, and pulled me into a hug. Then her nose wrinkled. She actually wrinkled her nose. "You smell like, is that manure?" She whispered it, but not quietly enough. The table heard. The neighboring table probably heard. Dad laughed, not a polite chuckle, but a full, genuine laugh that made heads turn. "That's what happens when you choose to be a farmer instead of using your Oxford education for something respectable, darling." I felt the familiar burn of humiliation crawl up my neck. 5 years running an organic farm in the Cotswolds, and they still couldn't see it as anything but a joke. To them, I was the family disappointment who'd thrown away opportunity to play in dirt. Mum didn't even stand when I sat down. She just gave me that look, the one that traveled from my scuffed boots to my makeup-free face with surgical precision. "Hannah, darling, this restaurant has a dress code. You really think you belong here? Looking like that?" The neighboring table wasn't even pretending not to stare now. I could feel their eyes on me, could imagine what they were thinking. What's that woman doing here? Did she get lost on her way to the pub? Victoria's husband James was glued to his phone, his body language screaming his desire to be anywhere else. He'd always been embarrassed by me, even before I left London. Now I was just a convenient excuse to check his emails. "Maybe we should have met somewhere more appropriate for your lifestyle," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Like a pub, or a McDonald's." The words landed like slaps. Each one calculated, each one designed to put me in my place, below them, beneath them, unworthy of this table, this restaurant, this family. I was about to respond when I saw her. Caroline, the restaurant manager, an elegant woman in her 50s who moved through the dining room like a dancer. She was walking directly toward our table, and I watched my family tense. Mum straightened in her chair. Dad cleared his throat. Victoria's eyes went wide with something like panic. They thought Caroline was coming to ask me to leave. Instead, her face broke into the warmest smile I'd seen all evening. "Miss Hannah, welcome back. It's wonderful to see you again. Your usual table is ready, but I see you're dining with family today. Shall I have the private dining room prepared instead?" The silence that followed was absolute. Dad choked on his wine. Actually choked. A violent cough that made his face turn red as he grabbed for his water glass. Victoria's mouth dropped open, and I looked at Caroline with the faintest smile and said, "Hello, Caroline. The private room won't be necessary. This table is fine." The silence stretched like taffy, sticky and uncomfortable. Marcus was still coughing, his face cycling through shades of red and purple as he tried to recover. Elizabeth had gone completely still, her Cartier-laden wrists frozen mid-gesture. Victoria's eyes were moving between Caroline and me like she was watching a tennis match she didn't understand the rules to. "I'm sorry," Victoria finally said, and I recognized that voice, her courtroom voice, the one she used when she was trying to establish facts for the record. Did you just say welcome back? As in, she's been here before. Caroline was still smiling, completely oblivious to the minefield she just walked into. Oh yes, Miss Hannah is one of our most valued. Caroline, I interrupted gently, catching her eye. Thank you. We'll have the usual service, please. She understood immediately. Years of managing high-end clientele had taught her to read unspoken cues. She nodded, that professional smile never wavering, and retreated with the grace of someone who knew when to disappear. But the damage was done. The grenade had been thrown into the middle of our table, and now everyone was waiting for it to explode. What was that about? Dad demanded, his voice still rough from coughing. How do you know the manager? Did you work here or something? The last question was delivered with such obvious hope that would make sense to him, that I'd been a server here, maybe a dishwasher, something that fit his narrative of my failed life. I could have told them the truth right then, could have ended the confusion and the speculation. But 5 years of being looked down on, 5 years of being called a failure at every family gathering I wasn't invited to, 5 years of being treated like a cautionary tale, it all rose up in my throat like bile. Let them stew in it. Let them wonder. I've been here a few times, I said casually, picking up the leather-bound menu as if we were discussing the weather. The lamb is excellent, by the way. They source it locally from a farm in Sussex. A few times. Mum's voice had climbed an octave. Hannah, this restaurant costs £200 per person minimum. How could you possibly afford? She stopped mid-sentence. I could actually see the new theory forming behind her eyes, the mental calculations clicking into place. Oh my God, are you in debt? Her hand flew to her throat, clutching her pearls like they might protect her from the horror of having a bankrupt daughter. Is that why you wanted to meet? You need money. Victoria jumped on the theory like a lawyer who just found the smoking gun. I knew it. I knew there was a reason you suddenly wanted to reconnect after 5 years. You're broke and you need a handout. The accusations piled up like bricks, building a wall between us. But I just sat there, taking a slow sip of water, saying nothing. Let them build their case. Let them reveal exactly what they thought of me. How much do you need? Dad sighed, already reaching for his wallet like he was about to pay off a panhandler. A few thousand? 10. Are the banks foreclosing on your little farm? The contempt when he said little farm was so thick I could have spread it on toast. We're family, Hannah. He pulled out his wallet, the leather worn from years of pulling out cash to solve problems. Despite your choices, we won't let you become homeless. Before I could respond, before I could even open my mouth to speak, a waiter appeared at our table. He was carrying a silver tray with a bottle of champagne. Not just any champagne. Dom Perignon, the expensive stuff, the bottle that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Compliments of Miss Hannah, he said smoothly, beginning to pour for everyone. She's our owner, after all. Only the best for her guests. The word hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Owner. Nobody moved. It was like someone had pressed pause on reality, freezing everyone in place. Marcus with his wallet still clutched in his hand, Elizabeth with her champagne glass halfway to her lips, Victoria's face cycling through expressions so quickly it was almost comical, confusion, disbelief, shock, denial, and then back to confusion again. I'm sorry, James said, speaking for the first time all evening, his phone finally forgotten in his lap. Did he just say owner? The waiter realized he'd stepped into something nuclear. His professional composure cracked just slightly as he quickly finished pouring and retreated like his feet were on fire. Caroline reappeared at the edge of my vision, clearly sensing trouble, but I waved her off with the smallest gesture. This conversation needed to happen without witnesses. You own this restaurant. Victoria's voice had gone shrill, loud enough that neighboring tables were definitely listening now. That's impossible. This place is worth. She stopped, and I could actually see her lawyer brain doing the math. Belmont had been one of London's top-rated restaurants for 7 years. A table here booked out 3 months in advance. Michelin guides featured it prominently. Food critics wrote glowing reviews. The place had won awards I didn't even know existed for restaurants. You're lying, Dad said flatly, and there was something desperate in his voice now. This is some sort of prank. Did one of your farmer friends put you up to this? Is this revenge for... For what? I interrupted, and for the first time all evening, I let them see the steel underneath. For treating me like garbage, for mocking my choices, for assuming I'd fail just because I didn't follow your script for my life. I finally looked up from my menu, and I knew my eyes were cold. I bought Belmont 6 years ago, just before I started the farm. The restaurant finances the farm, actually. Turns out organic farming doesn't pay well, but owning a Michelin-starred restaurant does. Elizabeth's hand was literally shaking. She put down her champagne glass before she dropped it. That's not possible. This restaurant would cost millions. Plural. Where would you get? From Grandma Rose, I said simply, and watched the color drain from both my parents' faces. She left me her estate when she died 8 years ago. Remember? You all thought it was just her cottage and some trinkets. The memory played across their faces. I could see them remembering the will, reading, their dismissive attitudes, their assumption that I'd inherited pocket change. But Grandma had been investing in property for 50 years. Started when she was 20 with her first paycheck, never stopped. Built an empire so quietly that no one even noticed until she was gone. I paused, letting it sink in. The estate was worth £8 million. The truth hit them like a physical force. Victoria actually rocked back in her chair. James's mouth was hanging open. Marcus had gone from red to gray, his face the color of old concrete. Why didn't you tell us? Mum demanded, and now there was anger mixing with the shock. When the will was read, you said. I said Grandma left me enough to start over, I interrupted. Which was true. You all assumed that meant enough for a down payment on a flat in Zone 4. I didn't correct you because you didn't ask. You never asked. You just assumed, made your judgments, and moved on. Victoria's lawyer brain was working overtime. I could see it in her eyes. So you've been sitting on millions while I've been. She couldn't finish the sentence, but I could finish it for her. She'd been sending me care packages at Christmas, cheap toiletries from Boots, supermarket gift cards for £25, making jokes about my quaint little farm life at family gatherings I wasn't invited to. Pitying me. Well, you've been what? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Well, you've been treating me like I'm poor, like I'm an embarrassment, like I don't belong in places like this. The restaurant felt too small suddenly, too hot. The other diners had given up all pretense of not listening. This was better than theater. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. I need to see proof. Documents. This is too convenient. Too, you expect us to believe. Caroline appeared again, and this time she was carrying a leather folder. She placed it gently on the table in front of me. Ms. Hannah, the ownership papers you requested, she said softly, professionally. Just in case. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just pushed the folder across the table toward my father. Have a look. Caroline disappeared again, leaving the folder sitting on the table like evidence in a trial. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I'd reviewed those documents 100 times over the years, late at night when I couldn't sleep, when I questioned whether I'd made the right choice buying the restaurant, when I wondered if I should have used Grandma's money differently. But Marcus needed to see them. His hands were shaking as he opened the folder, and I watched him read. The deed to Belmont Restaurant, showing Hannah Margaret Hartley as sole owner, purchased for £4.2 million in cash in November 2018. The liquor license in my name. The business registration documents. 7 years of tax returns, showing consistent profit. Everything was there, undeniable and official. Elizabeth leaned over his shoulder, her Cartier bracelets clinking as she reached out to turn pages. Victoria was trying to read upside down across the table, her neck craning like a bird's. The silence stretched. 1 minute. 2. The champagne sat untouched in its flutes, the bubbles slowly dying. Finally, Marcus closed the folder. His face had gone from gray to something worse, the color of someone who just realized they'd made a terrible mistake and couldn't take it back. When he spoke, his voice was different, smaller. The authority had drained out of it like water from a cracked glass. Why? It was barely a whisper. Why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked, I said, and I was surprised by how tired I sounded. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only exhaustion. After Grandma died, you all came to me with advice. Remember? I looked at each of them in turn. Dad, You said I should invest my small inheritance conservatively. Maybe buy a studio flat in Zone 4 if I was lucky. Mom, you said I should put it toward a master's degree, so I could finally make something of myself. Victoria, you told me to use it as a safety net in case my farm fantasy didn't work out. The words hung between us like accusations because that's what they were. Not one of you asked how much she left me. You just assumed it was nothing because that's what you wanted to believe. That I was poor, struggling, desperate for your guidance and approval. Mum was crying now, her mascara starting to run in dark tracks down her cheeks. It should have felt satisfying, but it just felt sad. We were trying to help. You were trying to control me, I interrupted, and there was no heat in my voice, just fact. The same way you've tried to control me my entire life. Oxford wasn't my choice, it was yours. You wanted to brag about your daughter at Oxford. Corporate law wasn't my dream, it was Victoria's, and you wanted both daughters in respectable professions. The only thing I ever wanted was to live simply, work with my hands, grow things, and be left alone. I leaned forward, but you couldn't accept that because it didn't fit your vision of success. So you made me the family joke, the disappointment, the cautionary tale you told at dinner parties about bright children who waste their potential. Victoria found her voice, and it came out sharp, defensive. So what? This was all some test? Some elaborate scheme to humiliate us? You let us believe you were struggling, just so you could spring this on us. No. I was so tired. This was just me trying to have one dinner with my family without being made to feel worthless. But you couldn't even manage that, could you? I walked in here and within 5 minutes, you were making fun of how I smell, suggesting I don't belong, assuming I needed money. I stood up, pulling my coat from the back of my chair. The dinner's paid for. Order whatever you want. The 200 pounds per person tasting menu, the wine pairings, dessert, coffee, everything. It's on the house, literally. I was turning to leave when I heard it. Mum's voice, desperate and broken. Your father and I are bankrupt. I froze. We needed this dinner to ask you for a loan. That's the real reason Victoria arranged it. The restaurant spun. Everything I thought I understood about this evening suddenly shifted, like a kaleidoscope turning to reveal a completely different pattern. I turned back slowly. The restaurant, the other diners, the soft classical music playing in the background, it all faded into white noise. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. What did you just say? Marcus wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the ownership papers like they might somehow change if he looked at them long enough. Victoria was staring at her parents with a look of complete betrayal, her mouth slightly open. Even James had put down his phone. Elizabeth was crying harder now, her mascara running in black rivers down her face. The property development company collapsed. 6 months ago. We lost everything. The house is being repossessed next month. We've been living off credit cards, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. She looked at Victoria, and there was shame in her eyes. We didn't want to tell anyone. Especially not you, Victoria. You just had the baby, you were so happy. The baby gift you sent me? Victoria's voice was hollow, distant. The £5,000 check you made such a big show of presenting? You said it was for Oliver's education fund. It bounced, Marcus admitted, and he looked like he'd aged a decade in the past hour. We didn't have the funds. We were hoping to borrow from Hannah first, then make good on it afterward. The layers of deception were staggering. They'd spent 5 years treating me like a failure while their own empire crumbled around them. They'd arranged this dinner not for a family reunion, not so I could meet my nephew, but for a financial bailout. And they'd planned to do it while simultaneously humiliating me for being poor. The irony was so dark it was almost funny. I sat back down. The chair felt different now, like I was sitting in a completely different restaurant, at a different table, with different people. How much do you need? I asked. Marcus looked up, and hope flickered across his face like a match in the dark. 200,000 would keep us afloat for a while. 500,000 would save the business. We could pay you back within 5 years, maybe less. No, I said and watched the hope die. I mean, how much do you think I owe you? They stared at me, confused. For raising me, I clarified. For paying for private schools in Oxford and all those piano lessons I hated. For being my parents. Put a number on it. What's the price tag? The question sat on the table like something ugly and necessary. That's not what this is, Elizabeth started. Isn't it? I interrupted. You're asking me for money. I'm asking what you think you're owed. Because that's what this has always been about, hasn't it? You invested in your children the way Dad invests in properties. You expected a return. I looked at Victoria. You became a lawyer to pay them back for your education. You work at a firm you hate, married a man you barely like, all because you thought you owed them for giving you opportunities. I was supposed to do the same. Corporate law, a fancy flat in Kensington, a respectable husband. That was the return on investment you expected. Victoria's face confirmed everything. But I didn't play along, I continued. So I became the family disappointment, the wasted investment, the loss you wrote off on your emotional tax returns. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. Here's the truth. I don't owe you anything. You chose to have children. You chose to send us to private schools in Oxford. Those were your investments in your own legacy, in your own egos, not loans I needed to repay with my life choices. Victoria was crying now too, quiet tears that she was trying to hide. So you're just going to let them lose everything? Let your own parents become homeless? They're not going to become homeless, I said quietly. Because unlike them, I don't believe families should suffer just because they made poor choices. I pulled out my phone and made a call. Caroline, please prepare a check for £500,000, made out to Marcus Hartley, and set up a meeting with my accountant for tomorrow. We'll need to structure it as a loan with reasonable terms. I hung up and looked at my parents. Their faces were a mix of relief, shame, and confusion. You'll pay me back at 2% interest over 10 years. And you'll get family therapy. All of you. Non-negotiable. That's the condition. Marcus nodded immediately. Elizabeth was crying too hard to speak. But I wasn't done. There's something else you need to know. About why Grandma Rose left everything to me. About what she told me before she died. Regarding what you did to her. The mood at the table shifted again, like we were riding an emotional roller coaster that refused to let us off. Elizabeth's tears stopped abruptly. Marcus's face went from gray to white, the bloodless color of someone who knows exactly what's coming and can't stop it. Grandma Rose didn't just leave me her money, I began, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. She left me a letter. A long letter, handwritten, 14 pages, about why she was leaving everything to me and not splitting it between Victoria and me. And definitely not leaving any of it to you, Mum and Dad. I watched them carefully. She wrote it 6 months before she died, when she knew the cancer was going to win, but while she still had clarity. She wanted me to understand her decision. Elizabeth had gone very still, her hands frozen on the table. Marcus had closed his eyes like he was preparing for a blow. When Grandma was 65, 15 years ago, she wanted to downsize from her big house in Richmond. 5 bedrooms, beautiful garden, the house where you grew up, Dad. She was getting older, the maintenance was too much, and she wanted something smaller, more manageable. I could see the memory playing across their faces. She asked you, Dad, for advice. You were in property development, after all. You knew the market. She trusted you. I paused. You told her the house was worth £400,000. You even got it professionally valued by an appraiser friend of yours. So she sold it to you for £400,000, thinking she was getting a fair deal from family. Marcus wouldn't look up. His hands were clenched into fists on the table. 3 months later, you flipped it for £1.2 million. Grandma saw the listing in a real estate magazine. She confronted you. Do you remember what you told her? Hannah, that was business. Marcus started, his voice weak. You told her that's how real estate works. I continued, my voice shaking now despite my efforts to control it. You told her she should be grateful you bought it at all, that most developers wouldn't have been so generous. You told her she was old and didn't understand modern property values. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. You stole £800,000 from your own mother. And then you acted like she was stupid for being hurt by it. Elizabeth was sobbing again, but these were different tears. These were tears of shame. We paid for her care home. We visited every week. You paid £3,000 a month for her care home, I interrupted. For 3 years before she died. That's £108,000 total. You still came out £700,000 ahead, and you treated it like you were being generous. Like you were making sacrifices. I turned to Victoria. And you knew. Grandma told you 3 years ago, before she got really sick. But you sided with them because you were already working at Dad's firm, learning the family business. You thought if you stayed loyal, you'd inherit the property empire. Victoria's face crumpled, confirming everything. That's why Grandma left everything to me, I said softly. Because I was the only one who visited her because I wanted to, not out of obligation or guilt. I was the only one who listened when she talked about her garden, her life, her regrets. I was the only one who told her the truth, that what you did was theft, plain and simple. The table was silent except for Elizabeth's crying. She made me promise something before she died. My voice was barely above a whisper now. She made me promise that if you ever came to me for money, I would help you. Because that's what family does, she said. Family helps family, even when they've been hurt, even when they don't deserve it. I pushed the ownership papers back across the table toward them. But she also made me promise that I would make sure you understood what you'd done. That you would face the truth about who you are before you got a single penny from me. I stood up again. I bought this restaurant with money Grandma earned over 50 years of saving and smart investing. I run a farm with money she left me because she believed in my dreams, even when my own parents didn't. And now I'm loaning you money to save your business, not because you deserve it, but because Grandma taught me that breaking the cycle of cruelty is more important than revenge. But there's one more condition for this loan, I said. You're going to donate 100,000 pounds of it to a care home charity in Grandma Rose's name. And you're going to admit publicly what you did to her. The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke. Around us, the restaurant continued its elegant performance, waiters gliding between tables, quiet conversations, the clink of silverware on china. But at our table, time had stopped. Marcus finally opened his eyes. You can't be serious. You want us to publicly admit to what? A bad business deal from 15 years ago. I want you to publicly admit you exploited your own mother, I said calmly. Set up a charitable fund in her name. Endow it with 100,000 pounds. Tell people why you're doing it. Take accountability. Victoria was staring at our parents with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, like she was seeing them clearly for the first time in her life, without the filter of fear or obligation. You actually did it, she whispered. You actually stole from Grandma. I convinced myself it was just a business misunderstanding. That she was confused, that she'd gotten the numbers wrong in her old age. It was a business transaction, Marcus insisted, but his voice was weak, hollow. It was theft, I said. And everyone at this table knows it. The question is whether you're willing to own it. The dinner had turned into a reckoning. Elizabeth, to her credit, was the first to speak. I'll do it. Her voice was firm despite the tears. I'll make the announcement. I'll set up the charity. I've been living with the guilt for 15 years anyway. Maybe it's time to stop running from it. Marcus looked at his wife in shock. Elizabeth! No, she said, turning to him with something like steel in her eyes. Hannah's right. We stole from your mother. We've been lying to ourselves about it ever since. And worse, we've been taking out our guilt on Hannah because she reminded us of what we did. She looked at me, and I saw my mother, really saw her, maybe for the first time. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. For all of it. For making you feel small. For treating your choices like failures. For not seeing what an incredible woman you've become. It wasn't enough. Years of hurt don't heal with one apology. But it was a start. A foundation. Something to maybe build on. Marcus took longer. I watched him struggle with his pride, watched it choke him. But eventually, faced with losing everything, he nodded. I'll do it. The charity. The statement. All of it. The loan was structured over the next hour. Caroline brought papers. My accountant joined us via phone. The terms were drawn up. Pound 500, 000 at 2% interest over 10 years, with 100,000 pounds designated for the Rosemary Hartley Memorial Fund for Elder Care. As the evening ended, something shifted. Not forgiveness, that was still a long way off, but acknowledgement, truth, a crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. Victoria pulled me aside as they were leaving. The care packages, the pity. God, I'm so embarrassed. Don't be, I said, and I meant it. You thought you were being kind. I was being condescending, she admitted. I saw what I wanted to see. I'm sorry. Can I bring Oliver to visit the farm sometime? I smiled. I'd like that. 6 months later, the charity was thriving. The restaurant had expanded to a second location. Marcus and Elizabeth had paid their first loan installment early and were actually attending therapy. And Victoria brought Oliver to visit the farm every month, letting him feed the chickens and pick vegetables from the garden. I'd built an empire on my own terms and learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well,